The villains of Squid Game are horrible people, but that doesn't stop them from having sad backstories. So in this video, I'll be going over the backstories of every Squid Game villain and ranking them. Starting off with the frontman, or Wang In-ho. In-ho had a fairly normal childhood, living with his father, stepmother, and younger half-brother Jun-ho. He later got married, and was expecting a child with his wife, but she ended up getting a liver disease. A doctor told them his wife could either terminate the baby and live, or go through with it and risk dying. His wife chose to save the child, but she would require a transplant. The operation was too expensive, so In-ho had no choice but to borrow money from a criminal.
돈은 빌릴 수 있는 데까지 다 빌렸는데도 감당이 안 되더라고요.
This action was mistaken as him taking a bribe, resulting in In-ho getting fired from his job. In order to get the money for the operation, In-ho joined the 28th Squid Game. At some point during the game, Il-nam, who at the time was the one in charge of the games, offered him a knife to kill the other players with. Unlike Gi-hun, In-ho chose to take it and murdered the remaining players. He ended up winning, but it was too late as his wife had already passed away. Eventually, In-ho chose to enter the games again, this time as the frontman, a role which he's been working in for years. In-ho definitely has one of the saddest backstories for a villain. Even though he went on to oversee the deaths of thousands of people, you can't help but feel a bit sorry for the guy. Next up is the creator of the games himself, Il-nam. We don't know that much about his early life, although we do know that at some point he married his wife and had a son. Il-nam became a loan shark once he was older, and eventually he became a businessman. He was rich because of this, but grew bored and quickly. He became friends with some of his clients, who agreed with Il-nam's thoughts about life being boring. They eventually came up with the idea of the games, which started in 1988. Il-nam became the host while his clients became the VIPs. Il-nam's backstory is not remotely sad, and you can't sympathize with him at all. He started the games all because he was bored,
죽기 전에 꼭 한번
which caused the deaths of thousands of people throughout the years. The games have been running since 1988, which means 36 games have taken place. That's thousands of deaths, and all because Il-nam was bored. Our next villain is Jong Deok-soo, the gangster from Season 1. Again, we don't know anything about his childhood. All we really know is that at one point in his life, he got into trouble with his boss and had large amounts of gambling debt with a bunch of loan sharks from the Philippines. Even if he did have a sad backstory, he's not exactly the easiest guy to feel sympathy for. We've seen him kill and injure multiple people without remorse, and even seem to enjoy it at some points. A sad backstory isn't nearly enough for him to gain sympathy from the viewers. The next villain, the Recruiter, is one of the most evil people in the series. We saw him toy with homeless people in the park. And he ended up killing Mr. Kim after forcing him and Woo-suk to play a deadly game of rock, paper, scissors -1. When he first started working with the games, he was one of the circle workers. Over the years, he ranked up to a triangle soldier and finally a square manager. At one point, he came face to face with his father in the games and killed him without hesitation. The Recruiter also befriended Sea Captain Park along the way, as we see from the photos in Captain Park's house. He continued to work as a guard until he was offered the position of Recruiter, which he accepted, and worked until he lost his life in him and Gi-hun's game of Russian roulette. Not only is his backstory not sad, but it's downright evil. He spent years working at the games, killing plenty of players without remorse, including his own father, thinking that they were all useless trash. Then he worked as the guy who recruited people into games where he knew they would die. There's no universe where he's a sympathetic guy. He's just evil for the sake of being evil. Speaking of Captain Park, he's the next villain on our list. He worked as a manager for the games, befriending the Recruiter during his time there. Captain Park was no longer working as a manager by the time he rescued Jun-ho from drowning, but he was still in contact with the frontman, who was the one who instructed him to pick up Jun-ho. Nothing is known about his early life, but he did adopt a dog at some point, which was unfortunately killed by Woo-suk. We don't know too much about his backstory. From what we know, Captain Park isn't sympathetic in the slightest. He was a manager in the games, meaning that he'd been working there long enough to be promoted. We know the pink guards just don't start off as managers or soldiers thanks to the Recruiter, who was promoted over the course of several years. Captain Park had to have been working there for at least 3 years to reach the role of manager, meaning he was a triangle soldier at one point. He's definitely killed plenty of players in his time there, explaining why he was able to kill the drone operator in Season 2 so easily. Let's talk about another triangle soldier, Kong No-il. She had a lot of screen time in Season 3, and a lot of viewers were definitely rooting for her to succeed in her mission to save 246. However, her doing good things doesn't mean that she's not a villain. Before we get into that, let's go over her backstory. No-il was born in North Korea, and she became a soldier once she was an adult. She later gave birth to a daughter, but when she escaped in 2017 by killing her superior officer, she was forced to leave her daughter behind. No-il attempted to go back to North Korea, presumably for her daughter, several times, but her attempts failed. After making it to South Korea, she met the masked officer, who was also a defector from the north in the hospital, where he recruited her as a soldier, due to hearing about her escape. She began to work in an amusement park while living in her car, still trying to find her daughter and bring her to the south. No Yul would also work as a triangle soldier for the games, from 2019 to 2024. No Yul definitely has one of, if not the saddest backstory in the series. She was born in North Korea, escaped without her husband and child, and wasn't able to go back for her daughter. Even with all of her wrongdoings, she's still a very sympathetic character, and her attempts to bring down the games do slightly make up for it. Our next villain is also a defector from the north, the masked officer, that was introduced in Season 2. We get to hear more of his backstory in Season 3, and it's sort of similar to Noel's. They were both born in North Korea, however we don't know how he escaped. We don't really know how he was recruited either, but he did lose someone close to him because they were unable to get a donor for a kidney transplant.
거기서 가장 소중한 사람을 잃었으니까 콩파탄을 먹고 있어.
He started working for the games sometime after arriving in South Korea, and met No Yul in the hospital in 2017, hiring her as a triangle soldier after hearing about her exploits in the north. He worked as a manager, meaning at some point he had to have been a triangle soldier, since you probably need pretty good aim in order to even become a triangle soldier. The masked officer could have been a soldier when he was in the north, like No Yul. The masked officer is a pretty mysterious guy. Honestly, we don't know enough of his backstory to judge whether or not it's sad. We don't even know what his name is. But being born in North Korea is already not great, and he apparently lost someone close to him due to kidney issues. He definitely doesn't have a good backstory, but we just don't have enough information about him to even decide if it's sympathetic or not. The next villain is Nam-gyu, one of the most despicable characters in the series. Before he joined the games, he worked as a promoter in a club called Club Pentagon, where he met Thanos. Nam-gyu bought Thanos drugs, and gave him free drinks through his position at the club. Nam-gyu was a drug user as well, using everything he could get on the streets. Nam-gyu later invested money into the cryptocurrency Dalmatian, due to the YouTuber MG Coin's advice. The crypto turned out to be a scam, and Nam-gyu lost 300 million won when the crypto owners stole the money from the coin. Because of this, Nam-gyu ended up joining the 2024 Squid Games.
너 때문에 수업 깨졌다 이 개새끼야. 나도야.
Nam-gyu's backstory isn't very sad. The only sympathetic aspect of it is the fact that he lost all of that money in the cryptocurrency scam, but honestly, investing in crypto in the first place is risky, and he definitely knew that. Taking the advice of a YouTuber to invest in a coin will almost never end well. Thanos, everybody's favorite washed-up rapper, is up next. He was a menace in Season 2, pushing people left and right in red light, green light, and bullying Myung-gi with his crony Nam-gyu. But Thanos has a sadder backstory than you might think. Before joining the games, Thanos was a mildly famous rapper. According to Myung-gi, he once forgot the lyrics to one of his songs during a competition, and lost out on first prize. He was a pretty big fan of MG Coin and claimed he watched all of Myung-gi's videos. Thanos decided to invest all of his rapping money into the Dalmatian cryptocurrency on MG Coin's advice, about 500 million won, and lost everything once the coin was revealed to be a huge scam.
230번 최수봉 채무액 11억 9천.
Thanos was drowning in debt, and eventually decided to go to the Han River Bridge to end his life.
내가 여기 오기 전에 자살하려고 한강 다리 위까지 올라갔었거든.
However, before he jumped, he was offered a business card by the recruiter, which led to him entering the 2024 games. It's not as sad as some of the backstories here, but losing all of your life savings must be a pretty terrible experience. Thanos sure was a bad person, but he definitely didn't deserve to go through what he did. The next villain is definitely one of the most controversial characters, Cho Sang-woo. You know, you could argue that Sang-woo isn't a villain, but you have to admit, he's done some pretty villainous things during his time on the show. He tricks Ally in marbles and causes his death.
넌 건너편 골목으로 가봐. 나 반대편 팀들 살펴볼게.
네 형.
He pushes player 017 in glass stepping stones.
그럼 그냥 가.
And he kills Saebyok in her sleep before the final game. Even though he didn't do these things for fun like Nam-gyu did, it still kind of makes him a villain. Anyway, let's talk about his backstory. Sang-woo was childhood friends with Song Gi-hun, and the two would play games together as kids. When he grew up, he graduated top of his class at Seoul National University, a fact that Gi-hun loves to tell anyone he meets. Sang-woo eventually ended up in debt due to failed investments and became wanted, owing a debt of 6 billion won. He offered up his mother's assets as financial collateral for his investments, so he was desperate to get money to pay off his debts, which led to him eventually joining the 33rd Squid Games. Sang-woo's backstory isn't horribly sad, as he was wanted by the police for good reason. He also used his mother's belongings as collateral, which is horrible, but being in debt isn't fun for anybody, and he definitely deserves a little sympathy for what he ended up going through, even if a lot of it is his own fault. Last but not least, we have MG Coin himself, Lee Myung-gi. Now, Myung-gi didn't start out as a terrible guy. He voted X after realizing his pregnant ex, Jun-hee, was in the games. He tried to protect her and mingle in the six-legged pentathlon, and the list goes on. The fourth game, Hide and Seek, was where everything went downhill. But we're not here to talk about that. Let's go over his backstory. Myung-gi was a famous crypto YouTuber who went by the name MG Coin. He made videos about cryptocurrency and investing. Myung-gi was dating Kim Jun-hee, and eventually Jun-hee became pregnant. However, Myung-gi one day promoted a scam coin called Dalmatian, and once the coin was revealed to be a scam, his viewers who invested it on his advice were furious at him. Myung-gi eventually went on the run for fraud and violating financial laws, ghosting Jun-hee for 6 months to protect her. We see him playing Dakji with the recruiter shortly before the 2024 games begin, which led to him joining the games as Player 333. Myung-gi's descent into madness was sad to watch, especially because some viewers were definitely excited for him to get some sort of redemption. Unfortunately, it turns out he was just a scummy guy all along, and him trying to kill his own baby for more money just proved that. Now you might be wondering why some villains like Player 100 or Seonye aren't on this list. Well, the problem is that they simply don't have enough of a backstory to go over. All we know about Seonye is that she was supposedly a shaman before entering the games, and that really isn't enough. Player 100 suffers from the same issue. We know he took out a 10 billion won debt that he was unable to pay back, but that's really it. Nothing about their childhoods, relationships, anything. That's why they aren't included here. If you enjoyed this video and want to check out Squid Game's dumbest moments, click the video on the screen.